Welcome to day 3 of the 2021 Planetary Health Annual Meeting, co-hosted by the University of São Paulo and the Planetary Health Alliance. I am Antonio Saraiva from the University of São Paulo. We are so pleased to have you join us at our 4th annual meeting and our first virtual meeting and festival. We are thrilled that there are over 4,800 people registered for the conference from 128 countries, truly a planetary event. On Monday, we had an extraordinary start to the annual meeting, where we explored the theme of foundational values for planetary health. It was a day of deep reflection to explore, recognize, and acknowledge the values we need to achieve the great transition, and which we need to keep in mind as we move along every day in this conference and after it. Yesterday, we focused on the theme of knowledge for planetary health, with the goal of having conversations around how to foster and embed a planetary health ethos, context, and content throughout our global research and educational institutions and funding organizations. Yesterday's conversations focused on structural changes that need to be made in research, education, and funding organizations. Wonderfully, what we learned is that these changes are currently being seriously discussed and acted upon within these institutions. We learned about fantastic examples of planetary health being embedded not only within education departments, but as an operational framework for entire education institutions. We also heard a reaffirmation that funding agencies are dedicated to addressing the grand challenges of our time, that they are sincerely interested in collaborating with each other and with partners. We also heard of an emphasis on translating knowledge to action and engaging with policymakers to ensure we can create large-scale change on the local, regional, national, and international levels. There was also a lively interview on how planetary health educational courses and materials are gaining traction around the world and are being developed for everyone, not just health students, but for all disciplines at all levels of education and the general public. Our discussions are impossible for me to capture in words. So, fortunately, all the sessions were recorded and will be available to you on this platform and on the PHA YouTube channel in all 5 languages: English, Portuguese, Spanish, French, and Mandarin. Those conversations provide an excellent background for today's discussions on how can planetary health-based economies and businesses flourish in the 21st century. Before I end, however, I want to remind you of a few exciting PHA program launches and housekeeping items. First, individual membership in the Planetary Health Alliance is now open. All individuals above the age of 13 are invited to join the Alliance, which you can do through our brand new online members community on the networking platform Hilo. On Hilo, you can also easily join any of the new 10 PHA regional hubs or any of the other PHA communities. You can learn more at the PHA booth in the Exhibit X section of the main event hall. Please also consider adding your voice to the São Paulo Declaration on Planetary Health Global Consultation. This declaration will be the first document of its kind from the planetary health community, outlining what actions are necessary to achieve the great transition. Your contributions will serve as a call to action for the global community. You can join the online consultation on Spark Blue, hosted by the United Nations Development Programme, by visiting the São Paulo Declaration booth in the exhibit hall as well. Visit our other partners in the exhibit area as well. They have a lot of wonderful information and offerings. We are grateful for all their contributions and collaborations. Finally, remember to check out the side and festival events that are happening before and after the main sessions and science lightning talks. So many groups, more than 70, from around the world have contributed their time and effort to engage us in important planetary health conversations and art. Please join them. So now I'm very pleased to be introducing our first panel of the day, entitled New Businesses for a New Society. I'd like to briefly introduce our moderator, John Fullerton. John Fullerton is an unconventional economist, impact investor, writer, and some have said philosopher. He's the founder of the Capital Institute and author of Regenerative Capitalism, How Universal Patterns and Principles Will Shape the New Economy, from 2015, and Finance for a Regenerative World from 2019. After a 20-year career on Wall Street, where he was a managing director of what he calls the old JP Morgan, John listened to an inner voice and walked away in 2001 with no plan but many questions that crystallized into the creation of the Capital Institute in 2010. The Institute is dedicated to the bold reimagination of economics and finance in alignment with living systems principles and the wisdom traditions that have stood the test of time. John is the chairman, co-founder, board member, and advisor to numerous sustainability-related initiatives. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Antonio, and great to be with everyone here today. We have a really extraordinary panel to discuss business in the new economy, and I say that really with all sincerity and great respect for everyone here. Everyone always says that, but as you read everyone's biographies, you'll realize that the organizers of Planetary Health have really brought together an extraordinary group of folks, and it's a privilege for me to try to facilitate this conversation. Let me first just introduce everyone to you. I think they're all still on the screen, but we have Silvia Lagnado from Natura. Not only is she running the sustainability and related growth initiatives at Natura, but she also has experience at Unilever and a little company that's involved in sustainability called McDonald's. So she has an extraordinary breadth of experience across what I would call mainstream business and trying to make mainstream business work for the planet and for society. We have Tom Szaky, who is the founder and CEO of TerraCycle. TerraCycle is at the cutting edge of the whole recycling movement. The company has won about 1,000 awards. Tom's also managed to write 4 books while he's not busy, including a wonderful book called Revolution in a Bottle. And he's going to be talking to us about the whole recycling circular economy activity. Bruce Friedrich is here from the Good Food Institute. He is very passionate about the challenge of alternative proteins and reducing in particular, meat's impact on the planet. He's got a TED Talk that's been seen 2 million times, so you might want to make that 2,000,001 when you were done. And then finally, and certainly not least, and I will butcher your name, Coach, but Kotch, but it's Kotch Voraakhom from Thailand. And Kotch is a landscape architect. She works at the intersection of the built environment and the human economy. And she's also has won all kinds of awards, including Time Magazine's Next 100, Time Magazine's Rising Stars, Time Magazine's 15 Women Changing the World, and I'm sure there's 15 other prizes that I'm not even aware of. So we're going to have a great conversation. My role here will be to set some context very briefly, and then we'll have brief presentations from each of the panelists, and then hopefully engage in a robust conversation and have time for questions when we're all done, if I manage to keep us moving. So let me jump right into it. I'm going to share a screen to keep me on task. I've prepared a few slides here just to trigger our imaginations. Can someone tell me, is that showing up properly?
Does not seem to be so yet, John.
Shall I try again? Are you still there? Oh, here, I think I see the problem. My apologies. Here we go. Is that working?
Yes, we see your desktop now.
And so if I do this, you'll see a slide, I hope.
Absolutely. You got it.
Good. Okay, so the topic is new business for our new, and I would say, regenerative society. I just want to put into context where I see we are in this moment. Climate change is obviously at front of center in everyone's minds, and just a reminder about how systems respond to pressure, and pressure including heat. If you just think about water, water moves from a solid state until it warms up enough to become a liquid, and it stays in a liquid state for a broad range of temperatures until it reaches another state where it begins to boil and it transforms into a gas. And this is what system scientists call a phase shift transition. And we are facing the risk of a phase shift transition in the human economy. And I'm having trouble getting my slides to move. We are facing the risk of a phase shift transition in the human economy and in human society if we don't manage to keep the temperature of this Earth within this boundary it's been in for the entire Holocene, and we use this 1.5 degrees warming as the threshold that we're looking for. So we live in a truly remarkable moment in time. I would suggest we are living in a moment where we're shifting eras from the modern era that's lasted over 400 years now, and trying to find our way into what some are calling the integral era. So this is a very big, exciting moment, but also a moment filled with danger if we don't get it right. As a finance person, I've reduced the root cause of this problem to our economic system. There are other root causes, like, for example, our separation from each other and our separation from the planet. But I do believe that it's our economic system, and in particular finance, that's driving this. We have a worldview that if we organize our economies around finance as the arbiter of efficiency and driver of value, that things will work out well. There's a long story behind that. But I would suggest that we've got this exactly inverted inside out, and we need to reimagine our economy as embedded in the biosphere, which it is, and finance as in service to an economy, embedded in society, embedded in the planet. I've written about this in a paper, as you heard, called Regenerative Capitalism, How Universal Principles and Patterns Will Shape the Next Economy. It's available on our website, capitalinstitute.org. In a nutshell, I believe we are seeking to find our way from a degenerative mechanistic design for our economy toward a whole systems approach, a natural system design that involves holistic thinking and patterns instead of parts. And much of our work in business is moving us from the left to the right. There is no business that I'm aware of that's all the way to the right. So this is a journey, not a simple destination that we can claim victory toward. The key to regeneration is that it's a process. It's the process of living systems that make them sustainable over the long period of time. So it's not a goal, it's a process that defines life on this planet, and I believe needs to define the design of our economy. In the paper, I talk about 8 principles. I won't go into them here, but the idea is that each business, each local economy is unique, but they all need to follow living systems principles. These principles happen to be beautifully aligned with many of the wisdom traditions that we've chosen to forget. Finally, I'm not the first one to think of this idea. Bucky Fuller beautifully said that nature is an efficient, self-regenerating system. If we discover the laws that govern the system and live synergistically within them, sustainability will follow and humankind will be a success. Now, what he didn't say in that quote, but what I know he meant, is that if we don't follow and align with living systems, the human experiment will be severely disrupted. So with that, I'd like to get started on the panels, or with the panelists. Again, each of these are doing the real work in the real world, and all of us are learning together how to implement these ideas in practice. And even if people aren't singing off of the regenerative songbook, I think if you familiarize yourself with living systems principles, you'll see them showing up in everyone's work here. So with that, I think we're going to start. What did I say? We're going to start with you, Tom. The whole circular economy piece is very much, in my mind, sort of the beginning of this regenerative journey. We need to reduce our footprint on this planet, and the best way to do that is through intelligent metabolism of the materials that we are using. And I'll turn it over to you, Bruce, to describe what the amazing work you're doing at TerraCycle.
John, thank you. I'm going to just share a little bit of visual as well, because I think the work we're doing has a very sort of strong visual componentry to it. And so bear with me as I put that up and give just a few minutes on the background of what we do. And may I just confirm that that's coming through? We should just see a cover slide, perhaps. Excellent. So very quickly, TerraCycle is a mission-driven waste management company, and our mission is to eliminate the idea of waste. Today, we operate in 22 countries around the world. India and Thailand as a nonprofit organization, everywhere else as a mission-driven for-profit organization. And I think the biggest lessons I can share is that we focus on the physical circular economy, which is how do we make sure things are not wasted and those molecules and those materials can go around as many times as possible. That typically begins with how do we start looking at systems that are linear, where the product or the package may not be recyclable, and figure out how can we collect and recycle it. And a big lesson that we've learned along the way here is that what makes something not recyclable is not that it can't be recycled. That's actually really good news. Technically, almost everything out there can be recycled. It's simply that what makes something not recyclable if it's not economically profitable for a waste management company to carry out the exercise. So what makes, say something like if we take personal care products like a shampoo bottle, highly recyclable, is that it's profitable to do so. And what makes something like, let's say, a lipstick container not recyclable is in the inverse. It costs more to collect and process than the results are worth. So what we try to do in our first division is focus with wonderful organizations, whether it's teams like the Body Shop, where we now run in many countries around the world, collection and recycling of their waste, all the way to large systems around, things like diaper recycling, and even mega platforms, systems, for example, we just rolled out in ASDA in the UK on very, very large systems around recycling. That gets us sort of to the first bend of the circular economy. Our second question is, well, then how do we help companies integrate waste back into products, which is the next bend, which really gets it to a circular economy based on recycling. And here what we focus on is the big white elephant in the room is that many organizations are committed to using major amounts of recycled content, but we're designing products from a virgin mentality, which means we're looking for recycled content that behaves characteristically in price and performance like virgin materials, and that tends to be municipally sourced beverage containers make up most of the PCR or post-consumer recycled content that is used. So the question that we try to think about is how do we start cleaning up the supply chains that are devastating our planet and creating the garbage crisis, the waste in our rivers, our oceans, our lakes, our aquatic systems, our Aboriginal communities, our inner cities. And so there what we've found is by leveraging narrative, systems can be cleaned, producing packages, like what you see here, all the way to now a project where we're cleaning up the top of Mount Everest, cleaning up the oxygen tanks and the abandoned heating elements at the top of the mountain to turn those into luxury Swiss watches. And finally, in conclusion, this gets us to a circular economy based on recycling. And I think we can go further, which is how do we shift to a circular economy that's a tighter circle based on reuse? And that is a platform that we launched just 2.5 years ago called Loop, which works with organizations to shift packaging from being a cost and owned by the consumer to an asset that is borrowed by the consumer and enables innovation that looks like this, whether it's ice cream containers all the way to laundry detergent, incredible innovation in the space of, areas like personal care, fully reusable constructs that do not become waste and can simply go around in a proverbial milkman type model. So the way this all comes to life now in retailers all over the world, like Carrefour in France, is you can buy already filled, ready to go reusable containers. And when you're done, return them to a bin at the front of the store. And then we from there take it, clean it, and send it back to manufacturers who refill it. So all in all, what we're at TerraCycle is focusing on this journey of linear systems to circular systems, really partnering with brands like Natura and others in great collaboration, and retailers and then cities and so on to bring this to life. And I'll conclude on one thought, which is, after all of this, none of this is the answer. The answer is to intrinsic sustainability, which is not circular economy. Circular economy is simply honoring the molecules and making sure they're not wasted. Intrinsic sustainability means we're in balance with what nature can bear. The answer to all of this is us modulating our appetite of consumption. And I think that is something we all need to reflect on, because business can become more circular. It should, and it will, but we also have to buy less to bring this all into fundamental balance. So that's just a little taste in how we think and what we do.
Beautiful, Tom. I really appreciate your relieving the false hope of a silver bullet, and we can all go back to business as usual. So thanks for that. That's fascinating.
Well, there is a silver bullet, right? It is don't buy. That is the fundamental silver bullet in sustainability.
Or buy different.
Well, I would actually argue with that. I'd say don't buy is the silver bullet. Buy different is better than buying normal.
Okay.
But if you want a silver bullet, there is one.
To be continued.
Yes.
Yeah, but I love the no silver bullet. So now we're going to switch, Kotch, over to you. Perhaps the equally impactful, if not more impactful, on the planet is the whole built environment. How we choose to live, how we build communities, how we build houses, how we build buildings, how we build green infrastructure. And so let's tackle this challenge through your window, and then we'll keep going from there. Thanks. I think you might be on mute, Kotch.
Thank you, John. So let me share my screen. You see my screen, right? Correct?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm a landscape architect, and I'm from Thailand. And I'm actually before the US election, I was invited by my government to put some thoughts on APEC. It's like Asian Pacific Economies Collaboration, and it's gonna have Bangkok chapter next year. And people just talk a lot about GDP, but it's just something that we need to rethink about beyond the GDP. And I just feel that if we're not talking about climate change, how could we either continue our humanity? And in the meetings, I said if Trump has been voted again, the climate change word cannot be appear in that meetings. And it's just oh, this is so sad. So I just feel that we have to rethink our fundamental of the way we think about economics, about development, and especially in urban setting. So this is wetland absorb more carbon 3 times than forest, but people often think wetland as a wasteland. And this is absorb more carbon with sometimes you can set fire on this kind of forest because it's absorb so much carbon beneath the ground. And think about this is all the wetland that we occupy through the city, 20 million people city. And this is happen in many Delta cities around the world, including Bangkok, some part of New Orleans, New York, Tokyo, Shanghai, and many other places. So we actually destroy a lot of our nature. And then this is the boundary of the city. We have no more mangrove because we turn it to shrimp farm. We export the shrimp farm around the world, the best one, but we actually destroy. So I'm actually people thinking about water, there's so much flooding problems, and people think about only let's build dam, and all this project is multi-million bahts or multi-million US baht, it's part of the business in the government sector, and this is how we confronting the most flood. PM 2.5, we export rice and good things for you guys to eat, but the developed will actually export us trash, something that cannot be recycled in your country because it's so expensive. So you send it to Thailand, Vietnam, Jakarta, and this is like so wrong. So please stop doing that. I just feel that we need, because the government won't stop. It's just like this little money, but it's, so we went through this COVID period and this is crazy. Like we still don't know where we're gonna get a vaccine. So either adapt or die. And I actually didn't have much time to go through why, but I did the first park in 30 years in Bangkok, and I just feel like this is not just a park, but it's about how we can rethink the way we're gonna use like a built infrastructure to tackle climate change. And of course, so we confronting so much with flooding, so this park can absorb more rain and actually help the city within the areas, create more public green space. If you're not talking about public health, this is like so concrete city. And we're not talking about how all this development on the wetland, delta land, that's supposed the water go through the land, is all being like covered with concrete. And the problem, another problem is we kind of neglect all the canal that we have. So this park, I'm just go quickly, have wetland retention pond. It can double its size of the retention pond when it's flood. And so international tourists came to visit the park. The other thing is food. You like Thailand probably don't have a problem with the pandemic with food, but like we actually did. And this is like the project that become the biggest urban farming rooftop in Asia. And thinking about all the waste space in the city, this is another way of recycle space. Like we are creating like urban heat islands. Don't think about all those waste space in such a density. How can we use that kind of space fixing another problem like food security? So this is like the biggest urban farming, and it's actually from the idea of rice terraces, like how the farmer used to slow down runoff, like all the runoff is, we are pouring rain in this region of the world. So it's actually flash flood in the sudden, and the water that doesn't have room or no place to go. So if all this architecture can help absorb rain, slow down the runoff, like rice terraces, and also grow food for the campus, for you, for the residents, why don't we use those kind of space? So it's actually turning this to urban farm rooftop. New generation supposed to know how they eat rather than, yeah, we export so much pesticides from the US, like top 5, and slow down off 20 times. So I go quickly, and it's got so many awards. And the last one is another corrupted infrastructure in the city. It's been last for 40 years. And we turn it into like pedestrian bridge. It's like the first part across the river in the world, and it's doable because it's actually, we already have this thing exists in our city. So thinking about waste space is actually one thing that we have to, like we cannot afford to build everything's new when we're talking about development. Thank you.
Coach, that's very, very inspiring and terrifying at the same time. And
Yes.
I, you know, as tough as this whole issue is here and with COVID, I really just want to honor what you've just shared with us. Thank you. Next up, Bruce, and the topic of meat, industrial meat, is very much on our minds. There was a little film that helped with that, but Bruce has gone deep into this topic and has been for a while. So don't depress us too badly, Bruce, but let's see what's good that's going on. That's working.
I will not claim that there is a silver bullet, but I think the presentation will also not be completely depressing. So let's see what people think. New businesses for a new society. So As John mentioned, the focus of GFI and the focus of this presentation is what to do about meat production. So just level setting, the way that we produce meat today has some pretty significant external costs to the climate, to global food security, as well as to global health. This is Project Drawdown's list of 80 solutions for climate. And I want to draw your attention to plant-rich diet, which is one of the top 4 solutions if we're going to try to get to keep climate change under 1.5 or 2.0, the climate targets of the Paris Agreement. Plant-rich diet is here, it's in the top 4. And just to give you a level set, nuclear is over here and electric vehicles are over here. So plant-rich diet is significantly greater than either of these. It's a multiplier greater. The other issue to mention is antibiotic resistance. 70 to 80% of all antibiotics produced globally are fed to farm animals. It is driving antibiotic resistance. This is the cover story of the New York Times Magazine maybe 18 months ago. It is a problem that is intransient. It is a problem that is not getting better. And as the globe eats more and more meat, especially in developing economies, antibiotics that have been banned in Europe and banned in the United States are being used in China and other economies. And obviously antibiotics don't know international boundaries. And then finally, pandemic prevention. We are living through a pandemic right now. The UN Environment Program this last July, they released this report, Preventing the Next Pandemic. They listed the 7 most likely causes of the next pandemic. Number 1 is eating meat at all. The more animals you have, the more likely they are to contract a virus, the more likely that virus is to be zoonotic, and consequently, the more likely we are to suffer another pandemic. Number 2 is kind of the same thing. It's unsustainable agricultural intensification, which is also animal focused. Number 7 is climate change, which, as we saw a couple of slides ago, is significantly made worse by meat production. And here is the problem slide. The United Nations says on our current trajectory, we're going to need to produce 50 to 100% more meat by 2050. And really, Bill Gates has been launched his new book, and he's talking about how everybody's scratching their head. What do we do about meat consumption? Even in the United States, where the previous slides are best known, where global health community and environmental community and animal community has been begging people to eat less meat for decades, 2019 was the highest per capita meat consumption in US history. So convincing people to eat less meat has not been working. At GFI, New Businesses for New Society, instead of working against human nature, let's work with it. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel laureate in economics, talks about systems 1 and systems 2 thinking, and argues that physiology is systems 1 thinking. This is made very, very clear by the charts that you see about obesity and health, and the fact that globally, even as some countries are wanting, other countries are doing the opposite of that, and we are becoming more unhealthy based on overconsumption, even though everybody understands how not to overconsume. Where food is concerned, there is just with meat a linear relationship between economic development and meat consumption. But the brainstorm of New Businesses for a New Society is that we can make meat from plants and we can cultivate meat from cells. We can give consumers literally everything that they love about meat, but we can do it with lipids, aminos, minerals, and water from plants, or we can cultivate the meat in cultivators. We can grow the meat directly, and they have a tiny fraction of the climate change. They use 1/20th of the amount of land of the inefficiency of growing massive amounts of crops to feed those crops to animals so that we can eat animals. The beef comparison is literally 95% less land to make plant-based meat or cultivated meat relative to making industrial animal meat. And they take the likelihood of your food causing the next pandemic from significant to 0, and they take the likelihood of your food contributing to antibiotic resistance from significant to 0. So this is the focus. We need to make meat from plants, the exact same meat that people love. It needs to taste the same or better, and it needs to cost the same or less. And because it's so much more efficient, we're optimistic that that can happen. That is the focus of the Good Food Institute. We have 3 programmatic objectives: science and technology, industry partnerships, and policy. We have about 110 staff in these 6 regions. Our global battle cry is that governments should be funding this. Just like governments put billions of dollars into ag R&D, they put tens of billions of dollars into renewable energy. Even pre-COVID, they were putting more than $100 billion into global health. Governments should be funding this transition and helping us to make meat from plants and cultivate meat from cells. Industry also needs to be a partner. GFI has a bunch of resources at gfi.org. And the end goal is, just like this is a phone, even though it doesn't have a cord, and just like this is a camera, even though it doesn't have analog film, meat can be meat, even if it doesn't come from live animals. And the world will be significantly better off. That's the focus of GFI.
Sorry, I muted myself. That's beautiful, Bruce. Everyone is keeping to the time limits fantastically. So with that, Silvia, take it away, and then we'll have our conversation.
John, let me just check that you can see and hear me properly. Is that okay?
We see you beautifully, but we don't see a screen.
No, I don't have a screen.
Okay, good.
So,
Even better.
So you're gonna have to put up with me.
No, we're happy to have you in your beautiful dress.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. Look, I represent Natura & Co, we're called. So John said Natura. I've got a job at this group that's a new group called Natura & Co. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. So I've been involved at the company for almost 7 years. I was on their board of directors. So for those of you from University of São Paulo, I'm an engineer from Poly. But then I lived 32 years outside of Brazil, and I got back last year on a move with my husband after my kids had grown to experience our beautiful country and messy and complicated country again. So speaking to you from São Paulo. So look, I've been on the board of Natura. So it was Natura 6 years ago. And then during the time I was on the non-executive team, we acquired a company called Aesop, very premium. For those of you outside of Brazil, you'll probably be more familiar, in 2016. Then in 2017, we acquired The Body Shop. And so you just heard a little bit about The Body Shop in the context of TerraCycle. And Avon, a big company, acquired Avon at the beginning of last year. So for those outside of Brazil, because John mentioned Natura, Natura is the #1 beauty, toiletries, personal care company in Brazil. But not very known outside of Latin America. Very big outside of Brazil as well, but not outside of Latin America. So this group that we now have is called Natura & Co. And the reason why we decided to call Natura, and I think for those of you in Brazil, you'll be more familiar with this, Natura was and has been a very progressive company in the subject that we're talking about today. The founder of Natura, when he started the company, he didn't start the company because he wanted to make natural products. So the name Natura actually comes from his belief that we human beings belong to this massive chain of relationships that connects everything in our planet. The company is just a tiny little living organism interacting with this much bigger and complex ecosystem where everything is interdependent. And his vision was the quality of the relationships that we humans had within our walls, but also with other humans and with nature. In fact, we are part of nature, obviously, but we don't always remember that. We seem to think we are on top of nature and controlling nature. But it was our humble relationship with nature